Hello, my Italian food fanatics. Today, we're going to take a detour, kind of out of the kitchen, but still staying in the kitchen, and that is talking about how to sharpen your knives and what methods and what contraptions and what machines are best for doing it. Of course, you're going to have to do it on a sharpening stone in some way. And so I've prepared a little bit of a program for you to show you how to sharpen your knives and what I think is the best contraption for sharpening your knives on any level, even for a professional, believe it or not. So please, thumbs up, like, subscribe, share, and leave a comment down below if you feel inclined to do so. I answer all my comments. Well, it takes sometimes a long time, but I go through them and I try to answer everybody that writes in, that leaves a comment. So please like, subscribe, share, leave a comment, and come on, let's go and learn how and what to sharpen our knives with. All right, let's get started. We're going to start with the sharpening steel. And the reason for this is because you're going to use a steel far more than you are any sort of stone. Even if you use a machine, after the machine, I suggest that you steel your knives, and you're going to need a steel. These two here are diamond steels. They have little bits of diamond on there, minuscule amounts that actually help to sharpen the knife. This red-handled one is a medium, and then the green-handled one is fine. These act almost like sharpening stones in and of themselves. They're certainly not a substitute for this, which is a regular steel, which takes the fine burrs off of the edge of the knife and essentially puts an edge back on. In a commercial kitchen, when chefs are working, they'll start their day and they'll steel their knives a few times. Then they'll go about working, and a lot of times that's the only time you'll ever see them use the steel. Other than when the knife gets a little bit dull, they'll stop for a second, take the steel out, hit it a few times, and then go back to work. As opposed to, say, a butcher or somebody that's working in a meat factory, they are famous for keeping a steel on their side, and every single time, like a pool player who's chalking up his cue, they are programmed to take the steel out, hit it a few times, hit the knife a few times, and then go back to work. So they'll stop, they'll take it out, zing, 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 and then they'll be back at it. It's just a built-in habit. But in a regular kitchen, there is no time to hold a steel next to you and to be doing this sort of a thing. You do it once at the beginning of your shift, and maybe once or twice in the middle of the shift, if at all, and then continue on. These, like I mentioned, act more like sharpening stones. When you first put your knife on them, it grips the knife in such a way that there is a lot of tension placed on it, and you can feel it cutting into the metal. So these typically I purchased many, many years ago to act as a traveling sharpening stone for myself. They were very, very expensive at the time. They've been worn down, but they still work. In fact, in areas that I haven't really used them that much, in this area you can still see the difference. There's still diamond, it's still diamond encrusted there as opposed to right about there. That's all been worn down. They don't last a very long time, and I suggest that you do not purchase them. What I do suggest that you do purchase is a regular steel. Now, if you have small knives, you're going to think to yourself, well, I only need a little steel like this. It would be my recommendation that you buy a full-size steel, just a regular round one. It doesn't have to be an expensive one because they all work the same way, and you will have it for the rest of your life. I've had this my entire cooking career, and I've never had to replace it. It's very, very old, but it was a reasonably good quality purchase when I made it, and it's proven to be so because it's lasted this long. So now let's talk about how to steel the knife. You take the steel in your least dominant hand and hold it like this, and with your most dominant hand, the knife. It goes from the heel or the bolster, whatever you want to call this, all the way to the tip. So you must begin at the back at the heel or bolster and go to the tip like this, at an angle. Now this is the safest way to do it. Why? Because the blade is going against is going away from you, okay? As opposed to towards you. Now, you'll see these professional chefs, they'll hit the steel, zing, 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 and they'll do it really, really fast, and you'll want to be able to emulate them. However, doing it the wrong way will actually make your knife more dull than it will sharp. So it's best to start very, very slowly, and I can't tell you what angle, because I just do it naturally. It was through trial and error and practice that I am able to do this. But after a few times of practicing, serious practice, you take a few minutes every day and practice stealing the knife, just like this, and you will eventually develop the feel or the touch for the proper angle on your knife, and it will add an edge. It'll make it sharper noticeably. Now that's one way of doing it. The second way of doing it, which is safe, is to actually hold it straight up and down like this, and then go straight down on both sides. I'm going to hold it at an angle so you can see better, like this. I don't use this method, but if you feel safer doing it this way as opposed to the way that I just showed you, it's the exact same thing. It's just that the steel is held with the tip of it on the cutting surface or on some semblance of a surface. All right? Again, start very, very slowly, learn how to do it, and get the whole length of the blade, and then you can speed up a little bit. There's a third way of doing it, which is another safe way, but less safe than the first two, and that is to hold the knife this way and move backwards. This is the method that you see Gordon Ramsay do, and there's nothing wrong with it. All these methods work. You just have to get good at one method. I suggest not using this method, and the reason is because the blade faces your hand. Now, there's a reason why these things are here, is so that if and when that does happen, and it will, that this protects your hand, this part protects your hand from the sharp blade. So going this way works if you want to be like Gordon Ramsay, if you fancy yourself, if you're a Gordon Ramsay fan, but that is one way that you can do it as well. And then there's the most dangerous way, which I suggest you not do, and that is to come down this way. Why shouldn't you do it this way? Well, right now it should be obvious that it really can harm you, because if your fingers are here like this and you happen to slip, you're going to be one very unhappy camper if that blade goes into your skin, if it's sharp enough. And even with these, when you're going very, very fast, trust me, you will cut yourself and you won't even know that you've cut yourself. I remember a butcher once telling me he was butchering sides of beef, and they were going very, very fast because you have to produce, and he had felt a warmth in his crotch area. He stopped to work, and his knives were so sharp that he didn't even feel it, that he had cut himself. It took something like 200 stitches to stitch him back up. It was a nightmare, all right? So if your blade is sharp enough, you can cut yourself and not even know that you've done it. So please, don't use these methods. Use this method. Learn this method and this method only. And then, of course, anybody standing in front of you is in danger, but you can eliminate that by facing a wall. Practice slowly, going from bolster or heel to the tip, and in very short order, you will learn and know how to steel your knife. And this should be done after the sharpening stone after the sharpening machine of any sort, and even after the diamond steels that I showed you. All right, this is the last bastion. And then when you want to, again, like I said, put an edge back on, it's getting a little bit dull. Zing, 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 zing. You hit it a few times, and the edge will come back. It's only when the knife gets extremely dull that you're going to resort to our next methods of sharpening the knife, and those are going to be using stones and machines. And we'll be right back with that in a moment. All right. The first method that we're going to explore for sharpening our knives is by using a stone. This is a stone that is lubricated with oil. We also have wet stones which are lubricated with water. And then, of course, there are systems, there are grinders and things like that that don't use any lubrication at all. And those I don't recommend, but we'll get to those in a second. This is a 3-stone contraption or machine that is used in industry. You'll find this, and this is the larger version. There are smaller versions too. It's about $210, something like that, dollars to buy one of these today. And it's 3 stones. Oil goes in the bottom. It's a special oil that you have to purchase. It's formulated for this particular stone. So there's a coarse, then there's a medium, and of course a fine stone. Most of the time, you'll never even use the coarse stone. And if they do wear out, which in my entire life I have never seen one of these stones wear out, they can be unscrewed and a new stone replaced. So you buy this essentially for life. You'll find this, again, like I said, in large hotels where maybe 100 people are in the kitchen. And this will float from area of kitchen to another area of the kitchen. You'll run around looking for it. Where's the sharpening stone? Eventually you'll find it, or if they don't put it back where it's supposed to be. And this is what a professional chef will use in industry, or did when I was more involved in industry, to sharpen their knives. There is a drawback to this particular way of sharpening your knife, and that is because of the heel or the bolster of the knife. You notice that this heel or bolster is very, very thick, and so consequently you cannot sharpen this portion of the knife properly because it's not going to ever touch the stone. And for that reason, what will end up happening in the long run is that your knife will become bowed. I don't know if you can see that, but it looks like the Concorde from my perspective. This area has been bowed because of sharpening on a stone like this. This is the first knife that I ever owned as a kid, and I learned how to sharpen it on one of these stones and got it to the point where I could make any knife absolutely razor sharp. Now, and I didn't use any contraption to, lock my my hand or the blade on any particular angle, but you can see here how it's kind of bowed a little bit. That's a better illustration looking at it from this angle. So you have to know that if you do use a stone and your knives do have this sort of a bolster, over time it will bow. All right? So that's something to keep in mind. I'm going to come back in a second and show you how to sharpen the knife on this stone. All right, we're back. I'm going to show you how to sharpen your knife on this stone using the medium and the fine grit. What you do is you angle your knife here just like this, and you have to start at the bolster or the heel and go all the way to the tip, just like this. Now, I can't tell you what angle. That's all experiential. There are little doohickeys that you can buy that you can put on the knife that hold it at the proper angle at 15, 17, or 20 degrees. I don't own any of them. There's other ones that you can actually put on the stone itself and run the knife back and forth that keep the knife at the right angle. But I never learned that way. I learned through trial and error. And all I did was put the knife at a very severe angle. In fact, you can see right here where the stone actually has gone up against the metal. Now that may be bad. A professional, for example, knife sharpener might look at me and say, you know, that's not good. But what it did do is it created such an angle that my knives were always absolutely razor sharp. So you go from the heel to the tip. Let's say you're going to do this about 15 to 20 times. Then you switch and go on the other side about 20 times, 15 to 20 times, and whatever number you decide on. Then you turn around and you go half that number, for example. Instead of doing it 20, you'll do it 10. When that's done, 10 on the other side again, and then 5, and then maybe 2 or 3, and that's it. So you're done here. Then you turn around and you do the exact same thing, but on the fine. Now, there's one thing too that you have to keep in mind, is that if I can remove this, the stone has to be level. And so you will see in industry, or if you talk to professional chefs and they have this particular Norton tri-stone, that they will take it out of the this area that they have, the word seated, and they will put it this way in order to ensure that it's flat and that one side doesn't go above the other side. Now this has a little bit too much oil on it. I do that on purpose to keep it fully hydrated. I'm going to wipe a little bit of this off, and you repeat exactly the same thing with the fine stone. Again, 20, 20, 15, 15, 10, 10, 5, 5. And if you do it the right way, just at an angle, it's almost as if it's touching. I don't know if you can see right here, but you can see how right in this area it's actually grinding down. The angle at which I am sharpening the knife, I don't know what it is, but all I can tell you is it becomes razor sharp. You put your fingers on here like this to steady the blade, and you have to be careful because sometimes if there's a lot of oil on it, your fingers might slide. So again, I don't have to do it with this knife because this knife's already sharp. But you get the idea. All right, so now let's move to the next sharpening stone that I want to show you. All right, here is a different type of a sharpening stone. This is a whetstone. It was a gift that was given to me by a dear friend of mine who's a sushi chef here in Los Angeles. His name is Kei Nakamura, and he's probably one of the best sushi chefs in the city. He uses this particular stone. It's a 1200 grit, extremely fine, to sharpen his knives. And it was given to me as a gift because in the Japanese culture, you do not give a knife as a gift. If you do give a knife, it signifies a cutting of the friendship. In Europe, if you're going to give a knife to somebody as a gift, you give them a knife and a penny or a dollar along with it. And that signifies that the receiver of the gift will use that money to pay the final portion of the cost of the knife. So the person giving it, in theory or in spirit, has not fully paid for it, meaning they didn't actually buy it for you. You have to give the last dollar or euro to make the purchase final. And it's symbolic that they're not buying you a knife. So it's very interesting how both of those cultures have that sort of an understanding and being totally separate from one another. Anyway, so he gave me this as a gift, and it's extremely fine, but you have to soak it in water, just like the other ones are soaked in oil. This is soaked in water. I have not soaked this in water, but I'll give you the same idea. This is extremely fine, all right? And he uses this exact same stone, a 1200 grit, to sharpen his knives. And what he does is he uses a Votrinox or a Forstner knife. Here's one that's a cleaver. I don't have a I don't have an actual chef's knife, but what it does is that the bolster or the heel comes down straight like this. Therefore, when you do sharpen these knives, they do not create the bow. And what he does with the Forstner chef's knife is that he does it in a traditional Japanese style where one side is flat and the other side is at an angle. These are both at an angle, but his is flat. His chef's knife is flat on one side and angled on the other. And he uses this stone, and he goes back and forth like this, and he gets his knife to extreme razor sharp sharpness. All right, so there's another avenue for you to explore. If you have, for example, a medium and then a fine stone like this, they can be very, very inexpensive. You soak them in water, and you can practice with a knife that's, say, somewhat dull, that you don't care about, that's not that expensive, and get good at learning how to sharpen your knives. And to me, this is the best way, all right? Using a stone, that is. Not necessarily this particular stone, but using stones and taking a little bit of time. Once you get them to a razor sharpness, all you have to do is steel them, and then every 6 months or so, and I'm talking about somebody who's a professional in the industry and is working day in and day out, every 6 months or so, or maybe at the most once a month, you're going to go back to the fine stone, give it a few goes on this stone, and then go back to the steel, and you will get back to a razor sharpness. All right, we'll go on to our last thing here, which is a machine. Be back in a second. All right, here we have a Chef's Choice sharpening machine. This is an interesting one. It's a little bit more expensive than, for example, their bottom of the line. It was the top of the line when I first got it. It sharpens at a 15 and 20 degree angle. 15 being the East Asian knives and 20 being the US and the European. So here's the Asian or East Asian and European American, and then this is a finishing stone, okay? You put the knife in to sharpen one side here, and then again to sharpen the other side like this. Okay, this uses no lubrication other than a grinding wheel. It's about as harsh on the knife as I would venture to go. But let me turn this on. It might shake this a little bit. You may see some vibration in the video, but this puts it in at the perfect angle. And you pull back very, very slowly. And you do that 6, 7, 10 times on each side. And then you go for the fine stone. The same thing happens. You can hear it just a little bit. And it really makes the knife razor sharp. So with this sort of a stone, there's no guessing. The angle is there perfectly for you. And if you do this another 10 times on each side, after you've done it in the first or this one, depending on what you enjoy, what you like, it will add a very, very razor sharp edge to the knife. However, this does not mean, in my opinion, that you can then let it go at that. You have to steel it after this, as far as I'm concerned, as well. All right? And whenever you steel your knives, and whenever you use a sharpening stone, you must take the knife and clean the edge, because look, that's what you're going to get. Even when you steel it, every once in a while, you'll get little burrs of the metal that are on the blade that should be cleaned up before you use it. See that again? That's terrible. Well, it's not terrible. It is the way that it is. So if you use a steel, make sure you take a damp cloth and wipe your blade really, really good after you're done so that you don't get these shavings in your food. All right, so that's it. We have one more contraption that I want to show you, and then you'll have all the information that you need at different price levels, at different ease of operation levels to make a choice on how you'd like to sharpen your knives. All right, here is the final contraption. It is, I don't know, these are branded. These are made in China. There's probably one person or one company that manufactures them, and then they brand it for various other companies. Either that or it's every company for themselves. They steal one another's ideas and copyrights, and either that or maybe this came from a European, an idea from Europe. I have no idea. So this attaches to a ledge or a workbench, and then this contraption here is, the angle is fixed on this. The blade goes in here, and the sharpening stone goes across it like this. I'm sure you've seen it. It's becoming very, very popular online. This is about $35, $35, $40, and it comes with a bunch of different sharpening stones or whetstones. You'll see those in just a moment. All right. So they're a lot smaller. They're about this wide, and they go on the bottom here, so they go against the blade. It's kind of like a reverse sear. Rather than taking a knife and going on the stone, you're taking the stone and going on the knife in an arc, but at a specific angle. This is perhaps the easiest and best way for the price and the learning curve to sharpen your knives. Second best way would probably be the machine, the electric machine, and of course the professional ways for somebody that's really dedicated and wants to do it. But for $35, this is darn good. And we're gonna go outside onto my workbench, and I'll show you how this thing works. All right, here we are outside. First things first, I've taken the medium and the fine stone, and I've submerged them in water. They need to be submerged for about 5 minutes. So I will, while these are soaking, you can see there's little bubbles there. We have to soak them until the bubbles are theoretically gone. I don't particularly believe in that. That's what they tell you, but I think that you should soak them in there for about 5 minutes minimum, if not a little bit longer. You can't hurt. The longer the better. So now let me come back and I will attach the contraption to this bench. Please bear with me. It's very windy today, so you may hear some noise from the wind. When I take this contraption, I've removed the other arm that's going to go here. I'll put it back in just a second, and we're going to, like I mentioned earlier, secure it to the bench, just like that. Now, this piece is going to go through this little hole here, and we're going to secure it at the end with this little bolt, or whatever you want to call it, this doohickey. And we do that when we know that this area right here is going to be where the knife blade is going to sit. So we'll take this and we'll secure it there. Now, they don't tell you about this. They give you like an Allen wrench to use, but it's a lot easier if you just take some pliers and twist it up like that. So now that this is secure, we can take our knife and install it here like this. Now, we take the Allen wrench that's provided by these people, and we want to secure the knife while at the same time being very careful not to cut our hands. Again, there are trade-offs here. I wouldn't allow my child to use this particular contraption because of that. I'm going to turn this back down just like this a little bit so you can see. we're going to take the measure divider and have a level. I'm going to hit the level to 0. So that's at 0. All right, now that everything is secure, we're going to raise this up a little bit. This is the bottom of it. This is where the stone is going to go. We'll put the stone in here like this. Going to lean it this way. And see, we're at 26 degrees. So we're going to lower it. 25, 24, 23, 22, 21, 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 17, 17. There we go. And we'll tighten it up like that. And now we can sharpen by turning this over this way and going against the blade. Now, you start from the back and move to the front, just like you would with a regular stone. Except it's a reverse sear method. Instead of taking the knife and running it on the stone, we're taking the stone and running it on the knife. And of course, when you want to do the other side, you just switch it around that way. Now, I've already sharpened this knife, and it is pretty sharp. But that's the medium blade. And then when you want to change the fine blade, the angle is already fixed. There we go. And a few strokes on each side with this, about 20 to 30, and then you turn it over, give it another 20 to 30 on this side, turn it over again, go to 10 or 15, turn it over again, and finally when you're bound to about 3 or 4 or even 2 or 3, and then you turn it over again, 2 or 3 here. You can feel it. It'll glide across the blade very, very easily, and that tells you that you're done. Turn it back over. Now it's really sharp. If you thought if it wasn't sharp before, it really is sharp now. And you disengage. Again, being very careful not to cut yourself. And the knife, again, you have to be if you try to pull it out, there's going to be accidents. So it's best to really take your time and unscrew this so that it will come out without an issue. And now we got to go in and give it a good steeling on the steel. And you also have to clean this off because, believe it or not, there's all kinds of dirt and grime on there. Even after you steel it, you should wipe it off. So we'll go in and do that now. All right, my Italian food fanatics, there you have it. Multiple ways on how to sharpen your knives. There are other ways as well on a grinder. For example, if you go out to a store that sells restaurant equipment, typically they have a service where they're going to sharpen your knives for a very nominal amount of money. What they do is they take it in the back, and there's a person there that uses a grinder that has a little doohickey on it that holds the knife at the proper angle, and it goes back and forth against the belt or the stone, and they sharpen the knives that way. Back when I was at the hotels, a truck would come in that they would sell different tools for the cooks, and they would sharpen your knives for free. The guy would take them into his truck, and he'd use a grinder and really quickly bring back the edge. These are two methods of sharpening the knives that I've never availed myself of, because if you're using really, really nice knives, you want to do it yourself. That's the bottom line. So my preferred method is with the tri-stone, but that's going to run you about $220. You can also buy a medium and a fine grit Japanese stones like those kings that I showed you. They'll run you somewhere between 12, I've seen it as low as 12 and as much as $50 a stone. But if you buy those two wet stones and then use a steel, you have a great system there. Of course, you saw the machine. There is no learning curve there. You can just put the blade in, move it back and forth, following the instructions, and then in the finer areas. And the angles are perfect. You're not going to make any mistakes. Although, again, like the grinding from the store that sells restaurant equipment, there is no lubrication on those, as there is with an oil or a whetstone. Now, that run you about $150 to get that machine, but it's probably a machine that will last you for the rest of your life as well. And then, of course, on the lowest end for $35 to $40, you have that machine that I showed you that is kind of like a reverse sear is what I called it, where instead of taking the knife and going up against the stone, you're taking the stone and going up against the knife. For the money, it's almost unbeatable. However, if you want to take the time and learn how to do it, there is a steeper learning curve, but in my opinion, it's worth it. I use all different types depending on how much time I have, even up to using those diamond steels that I showed you earlier as a medium and a fine and then steeling. Those are great options as well, although in my segment I said, don't bother purchasing them. There's one other thing I want to talk about, and that is serrated blades. If you're using a serrated blade, please don't go and buy a very expensive serrated blade. In my opinion, resharpening these, it's impossible and it's not worth it. This was probably about $10. It's an offset. It was used in the restaurants to cut sandwiches. And when we used them there, as soon as they got a little bit dull, we would throw them out and just pull out another one. These are very, very inexpensive. At the time I bought this one, probably $10. Now, who knows? They could be $20. But for $20, even at that price, they're worth it. In fact, look. Here. Constantly changing them. I have 4 of them here. God knows how many I've gone through in my life, but these were the ones that were still a little bit sharp, and I brought them home, and now I have them in my collection. Another thing. One last thing about artisan knives. You'll see these beautiful artisan knives that have steel that have been folded one time on top of another, and they're very expensive. They're $300, $400, $500 for a chef's knife, and they're worth every single penny if you want to show them off. You're going to be on tour, or you're going to be on TV, or you have an appreciation for the cutlery and the artisan way in which the steel is manufactured. That's fine. But if you want a workhorse of a knife, I suggest you get a Wüsthof chef's knife. Whether it's going to be 8-inch or 10-inch, I would I would shy away from Zwilling Hinkels. Their professional line has gone down in quality in the last 10 years. In fact, I used to use them exclusively, and one of my knives broke, and there's a guarantee on their knives. You can send them in and get a brand new knife. I sent mine back. They sent me a brand new one, and it was a very, very thin piece of, a very, very thin blade here at the top. And to me, it just wasn't worth having. It was as if they skimped on the metal. And this is my opinion. I'm not being paid by any of these people. They had skimped on it, and I literally took the brand new knife, put it back in the box, and sent it back to them, telling them, I don't even want a brand new free knife that's gonna be this junk. And I went and I turned around and I've bought Wüsthof. This has got to be going on, I don't know, 12 years now, and I haven't looked back since. In my opinion, for the workhorse of the kitchen, this is the knife to buy. Costs are a little over $200, worth every penny. If I had to replace it every year, I would still consider it to be an excellent investment. On the lower end of the price spectrum, Victorinox, which used to be Forstner, is another excellent option. In fact, their bolster or heel comes down and is very, very thin, all right, so that when we do sharpen them on the stone, they're not going to bow like this knife will eventually, all right? I just prefer this knife to the Victorinox, but they are an excellent brand as well. So there you have it. Please, thumbs up, like, subscribe, share, leave a comment below, tell your friends, especially if you have somebody that is wanting to get into cooking school or get into this or is thinking about buying a knife or what have you. This may be the perfect video for them, especially this ending part in there. It may not be. It's your choice. You'll do what you want. But I appreciate your time. I appreciate your attention, your eyeballs looking at my videos, and I will see you again very, very soon. Thank you.